Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Championship Leadership Podcast. I got my good friend here, Paul Halme, out of you're in Dallas or Fort Worth, or
Fort Worth.
Where are you at? Fort Worth.
Fort Worth.
Okay. So Fort Worth, Texas. Paul has come to speak at, I don't know, the last four.
Yeah, three in person, one remote.
one was virtual, but that was still awesome. So I've gotten to know him pretty well over the last year through that, and excited to have you on the podcast today.
Awesome. Excited to be here.
Yeah. So first question I like to ask people is, championship leadership's the name of the podcast. So what comes to mind for you? And what does championship leadership mean to you when you hear that?
And it means, going above the average and even beyond that, and going to be, because you have leaders, but then you have championship leaders. It's kind of like in Tim Grover's book, Relentless. It's like you got the coolers, the closers, and the cleaners. And it's like, to me, like a cleaner's like a championship leader. A closer's like, oh, they're pretty good, but like championship's a whole other level. It's like winning a title, way different than winning a game.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's did you read his book, Winning?
I started the audiobook, but I haven't finished it yet. But it started off good.
Yeah. Relentless. Yeah, that's been one of my favorites for a long time. And it's probably still a little bit of the two, my favorite, but Winning was really good as well. So yeah.
Relentless is just so good. It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you and maybe a little bit about your story and your journey and how you've gotten to where you are today and what you're up to today.
Okay, cool. Yeah, my story is pretty wild. Actually, grew up in South Dakota, went to school up there. When I graduated, I was like, I got to go do something different. So ended up coming down to Fort Worth, Texas, with my best friend, Travis Luter, who ended up, becoming a crazy good jiu-jitsu guy, MMA guy. I fought in the UFC, so I got to travel a bunch with him and kind of built up through that. So it was a crazy fun time. And in between, that time window, I ended up getting married and then having kids. So I had to get a real job. I was like, I got to go to corporate America route. I need health insurance. And my wife was pregnant. So I ended up getting, I don't know how, it was a friend of a friend from jiu-jitsu, but I ended up becoming a stockbroker. And I'm like, this is really freaking cool. So I got all my licenses, did all that. And it was amazing. I got a crazy good education over the 6 years of doing that, but the calling just kept calling me to run a gym and keep training and teaching people. So I left that career. My wife was super supportive because it was a good job. I mean, it was like, it's like he had everything. He had the house, the kids, the dog, the 6-figure corporate job. But it was like, you just kind of, something was empty, was overweight, tired all the time, wasn't myself. And then started doing that, started running my gym and got really good at that. And then competing and doing stuff like that, I was having fun. And then people started asking us questions like, hey, how do you do this? How do you do that? How's your gym do this? How's your gym do that? And I talked to a couple other friends who were like, man, we should start a consulting company. And Alan Belcher, who was in the UFC, who's now in bare knuckle fighting, he was like, yeah, let's do it. It was his idea. And then, so we did that. And then we've grown that really to a really cool company until 2020. Cause when they shut down gyms, it's hard to consult for gym owners. So I found myself in a weird spot, tried a bunch of different stuff, just kept working on myself, doing some personal development during that, met up with you guys, go to your events, got to meet Jocko a couple of times. Just like, awesome. Man, I want to be a better leader. I want to do these things. And then I kind of went back to my roots over the last little bit of like running a business, teaching people how to do is fun. But what I always go back to is like finance and investing and creating passive income. So if like the last 2 years, I've really been focusing deep on that. And, on my Instagram, giving out a lot of good free content on there and just trying to help people, because it's crazy. Like when I go to talk to people, like even if they're successful, they still have money blocks, mindset issues and stuff. So it's kind of one of my passions is like help people break the financial cycle. So they might be older and like, oh, it's kind of late for me, et cetera, but it's not too late for your kids and your grandkids. And it's like being able to do that and pass down things that I've had taught to me by people that are stupid, successful, and wealthy, where it happened to me. And I think I brought this up at your event when I was talking, it was like, rich people talk to their kids way different than middle class and lower middle class people talk to their kids. So I was like, man, this changes everything. It's like, teach the kids this and then give them an advantage. So I've had a lot of fun doing that, because it's hard to talk to somebody my age. I'm 47, and everybody I talk to my age is like, oh yeah, my parents said the same thing. Mine doesn't grow on trees. We can't afford that. And it's like, you don't realize you bear that in your subconscious, and it takes forever to break that cycle. So yeah, I've had a lot of fun doing that. So I've kind of gone back to my roots, and like people always ask about the market stuff. Yeah, it's going to go up, it's going to go down. It's kind of like that Chinese proverb of maybe. It's like, oh yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
like,
right.
You just don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. Nobody could have predicted 2020.
No, I know it. And and hopefully we don't have another 2020 anytime soon, but
Never.
but we
I
will,
hope.
right? I mean, something will come along,
Oh yeah.
and that we won't be able to forecast. So what? So you left the stockbroker career to start the gym, or were you doing the both at the same time?
Yeah, I did an overlap because I was scared of it. I was like, because I knew I did about a 2-year overlap where the gym was like a hobby and
Okay.
it kept getting busier and busier. And I kept the corporate job. And then I changed roles where I could be in more of a job to have more flexibility so I could do more of the gym. And then it just hit a point where it was like, okay,
Yeah.
I can't do both anymore. I'm gonna burn out. I'm dying.
Yeah.
It was like I can remember I get off work at 5, come home, see the kids and the wife, slam a
Yeah.
cup of coffee, and then go teach till 9 at night. And I was like,
Yeah.
I
Dang,
can't
man.
keep this up.
Right.
So, and then the cool thing was I had 2-year window because your license doesn't expire for 2 years when you leave a firm. So I was like, man, I got 2 years. Let's make this work. And then by the end of the second year, we were doing okay. I mean, we weren't doing great. It took a while, but ended up
Yeah.
replacing more than my income and having more freedom and getting to travel the world. And,
Yeah.
I've competed in Brazil, Japan, trained in Thailand. It's like, cornered fights in London. It's been a crazy run.
You still compete?
I still compete in jiu-jitsu. My biggest actual win was a jiu-jitsu, won a Masters World Championship. That was 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
And then when COVID happened, nobody trained or competed. So that
Yeah.
shut down. But then I'm making it a goal, this year, because it's been a few years, but I'm making it a goal to try to compete, 2 to 3 times a year, just to
Yeah.
give something to push for. Because
Yeah.
we all know what it's like if you don't have something to train for. I know, like with you with your runs and stuff, like if you don't have something to train for, it's like, man, okay, I'll have that piece of cake, or yeah, I'll
Yeah.
go a little bit lighter today. And so now it's like, if I know I have a tournament coming up, it's like, I don't want to embarrass myself. It's like, I gotta,
Right.
it's like go there and not make weight. And like, how'd the tournament go? Oh, I busted weight and I got a t-shirt, I didn't get to compete. So
Yeah.
it's helped me a lot with my mentality of like, okay, I gotta get back into it. So yeah, the goal this year is 3 tournaments this year. So
Okay.
I'm excited.
Well, and it's just fun to compete too, right?
Yeah.
It's like there's something about like actually competing. Because I mean, a lot of people, they get out of high school and they just stop competing forever.
Yeah.
And it's just the weirdest thing to me to think about, right? Like, man, sports or athletics, if you played it growing up and through high school, is a lot of our life, and then all of a sudden you just don't do it anymore. That's so weird,
And it's
There's
weird. And
something about competing.
and they have an empty hole too. Like having my gym, people come in and it's like, you can see it. They're all like in their mid 30s. They're overweight. They're
Yeah.
tired. They've got kids and a wife and they've done a good job with work and everything, but just something's missing, and you can see it. I talk to these guys all the time. So it's like, I can see it from a mile away. It's like, yep, you need to get into something.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you get self-destructive. Then it's like, okay, I'm just going to drink myself into oblivion and go to strip clubs. It's like, you see that other,
Right.
I have friends that do that for a hobby. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's not a good hobby, guys.
No. Yeah.
It's way more expensive than jujitsu.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. So you talked about that a little bit, how obviously, I mean, that's a big part of what you do at ULW is you talk about finances and investing and all the different avenues and vehicles of investments and things like that. But then of course, you're helping people grow their gyms, and you're big into jiu-jitsu and the gyms that you have. Is there a way that you're able to marry those two up together? Because it feels like sometimes you're getting pulled maybe in 2 different directions. I don't know if it feels that way for you.
Oh,
But
constantly.
so yeah, like, is there a way how do you marry those two so that you can do them both together?
Yeah. The one thing I learned a lot, and, you learn that from different leaders, is like, managing your time is so important. It's like, having those times where it's like, okay, I do this at this time, this time, this time. And I've gotten really, really good about my schedule the last couple of years of like, okay, these are non-negotiable. It's like, I know I'm doing jujitsu at these times, so I got to do this at this time. Then, okay, in the mornings, I got a 2-hour window where I can do all my other stuff like that. So for me, it's like really becoming like controlling my schedule. So like my schedule revolves around me, not, me revolve around my schedule. It's like,
Yeah.
I pick what I'm going to do and when I block it. It's like, okay, we're doing this. And then it opens up more time than you'd think, because really, if you just do a couple major tasks a day and actually finish them instead of like starting 10, I used to be the guy I'm a multitasker, and I would start 15 tasks in
Right.
a day and finish none of them. So now it's
Yeah.
like, if I get 1 or 2 wins over the course of a month, that's like 30 to 60 major wins. You're like, that's a good month. So
Yeah.
you can balance it out. And the thing that's funny for me, it draws a parallel like money and jujitsu, because, we all know if you're married or we've all been in that situation where there's a money issue going on and you're fighting with your spouse about money when you could fix it, but it's like, instead we'd rather fight about it or, hide it, keep it to ourselves and not tell our spouse what's going on. And it's just like jujitsu is almost like a fight. So it's like, you got to embrace it and be like, yo, this is where we're at. We're working on this. I did this good. I did this bad. What do you think we should do here? And so, yeah, it cuts down a lot of that. Cause I have friends, that they're like, well, I just don't talk to my spouse about money. And I'm like, I bet you guys fight a lot. Dude, it's like, cause there's no other, when a spouse finds out you did something, they're kind of like, oh shit. So it's like, just communicate.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Money's, it's one of the biggest reasons people get divorced, right?
Oh yeah. It's huge, and it's stressful too. People stress about it all the time. And it's like, can't do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, who are some of the championship leaders that have impacted you in your life, like coaches, mentors, just, people that maybe have taken you under your wing, and really more so, like, what are some of the characteristics of those individuals that really have stood out?
Yeah, which is funny because people look at me now and they don't believe me when I tell them, but I actually played golf in college. Like, you can't see my ears.
I know. You told me that.
My ears are mangled. People are like, you played golf? I was a pudgy 185 pound, 6'1" guy playing golf, and now I'm way different. I didn't lift, I didn't do anything. I just played golf and hung out, but I had a really good coach in college, and he was like, I was talking to him because I was a walk-on.
College?
What's that?
What college?
Northern State University in South Dakota, actually.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I went north for the winter. It was like, it's too hard to go south. I tried to go south and it was like, it's just tough to compete. So I ended up going to a D2 school up there, and I was a walk-on, and they're like, hey, we might have one spot open, for travel team. And I'm like, what do I need to do? Cause I'm always one of those guys like, what should I do? Cause that's one thing I had lacked growing up. Like, I had a bad relationship with my dad. So I didn't have like a good father figure, except on the golf course. Like, my uncles and stuff, they would like teach me how to play golf, teach me how to compete. And I was like, okay. So first thing I got to college was like, I just talked to my coach. I was like, what do I have to do? And he's like, well, it's like, you're a walk-on, you have to out practice everybody. And I was like, okay. And he's like, be here, if we start at 4:00, I need you here at 3:00 hitting balls. I was like, cool. So I did it. And he's like, oh, I showed him that I didn't just tell him, because you've all been there, man. Guys are always like, man, I want this, I want that, I'm going to do this. And it's like, you're like, bro, you're 20 minutes late for practice. You really want this? For me, I was like, I came to every practice early. I stayed late. I did all the extra stuff. And then I ended up, winning. Came down to me and one other kid. And, ended up, it was cool. They were actually still friends this day, but we had like this, it was super stressful. I was super nervous because coach was like, okay, we got one spot. It's down to you two, 18 holes, go. And it was like, oh my God. And so it was stressful. Like, I was like, so I learned to compete at that age, it was like, but he was a really good leader for me. Cause he's like, man, if you want something, just show up and do the work, show me you want it, don't tell me. And then, then I got down here, and Travis, of course, is my coach, in jiu-jitsu and MMA. It was a whole different thing. Cause Travis is just, he's gifted, but he works really hard. So it pushed me, because I wasn't good at jiu-jitsu. That was horrible. Yeah. It took me forever. I was just beat on, and it was tough. Back in the 90s, jiu-jitsu was way different. Now people are nicer and they have beginner classes. Then it was just, you go get class and get beat up by the good guys. So Travis was a really good leader, and mentor for me. And then then of course, like Jocko, of course, he got real popular, and I ended up getting able to meet him a couple of times and train with him, which is ridiculous. So I've been lucky. And then, like, in business, we had a guy from jiu-jitsu that was a really successful business guy, and he kind of took us under his wing and taught us some stuff. Even when we were broke as hell and we didn't know what we were doing, and he'd take us to his businesses and teach us stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, shit, this is pretty cool. And then it's like talking about money, because I grew up, nobody talked about money. Nobody did. And this guy's like, hey, do this, do that. Oh, hey, pass me that check over there. And I pass him a check, and it's like, this is back when I was probably 23. And it's like a 65,000. I still remember this day. Like, it freaked me the fuck out. It was I don't know if I can swear or not, but
are you good? Yeah.
So I'll never forget. He was like, hey, pass me that check over there. Cause it was at his office, and I just passed it, and I looked at it, of course, cause I'm like, what's this? And I saw it, and I'm like, what, cause back then 65,000 was probably the equivalent of like almost 200 grand now. Yeah. Right. This was 20 something years ago. Yeah. And I was like, what is that? Because it's a distribution check. I'm like, what? What's a distribution check? And he's like, oh, I own this, we own this thing, da, da, da. We get paid out distributions quarterly. I'm like, wait a second. You get this check every 3 months? He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, I gotta learn this. It's like distributions, so I always tell people, it's like, that's why I'm so adamant about teaching about finance and investing in business. Cause if you don't find it, it's hard to learn. We know people all the time that have started businesses and they fail because they don't understand how to run a business. So it's like, teaching people and passing down things I've learned, has helped a lot. But yeah, going back to that, was like my business mentor and like leader. Cause it was just cool to watch somebody that was just acquiring, net worth, was a good dude, real quiet. Like, I don't think he's on social media now, but it's like, he's multi-hundred millionaire now. And he's still the same guy I knew 20 years ago. He hasn't changed. He just has way nicer stuff.
Right. Yeah. That's awesome. I think, I would say more times than not, that's kind of the story, right? When most people that you knew them before they got all the money, and sometimes you hear the story of how, they change when they get the money, but I'd say for the most part, kind of similar story. Yeah. It's like kind of the same guy, just more money, nicer stuff.
Yeah. Amplify. The thing I've heard one was that just money amplifies who you are. So if you're a unwealthy jerk, you're probably going to be a big wealthy jerk.
Right. Yeah. No doubt.
And that's where leadership comes in too, is like, being a good, usually people like that aren't dicks, it's like they're because you've been in the military, you have been around leaders where you're like, man, this guy's probably not a very good person.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Speaking of, so where did Jocko Willink connection come from? How do you end up coming to your gym?
Man, it was crazy. It was the craziest story. So we were all following Jocko,
times, right?
Yeah, a few times now. We were following Jocko at the rise. Like, he was on the Rogan podcast. We're like, oh my God, who's this guy? And in Ferris, and he got real popular. And they're having the muster in Austin, Texas. And a bunch of guys from my gym were going, but they were all corporate America employees, because the musters are expensive. So they were, but the corporate America was paying their tickets. And then one of my friends was like, hey, I got this discount code for some jiu-jitsu guys, blah, blah, blah. You want to go? I'm like, yeah, sure. So went down there and we were talking to some of the guys and networking, and ran into JP. And JP Donnell, who is a SEAL with Jocko and everything, he speaks. He's a really cool guy that works with Jocko. And he's like, oh, I'm moving to Texas, et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, oh, that's cool. My gym's over here. And I probably thought I'd never see the guy again.
Yeah.
And then one day he came in. I'm like, oh shit, cool. He's like, yeah, we moved in to town, So he was training at my gym. And then they were going to do an event where Jocko, because at that muster we helped out, because Jocko, I thought it'd be a bunch of like tough jiu-jitsu guys showing up there, but it was all white belts. So Jocko, we were like, hey, can we help? That's one thing I've learned growing up, is like, man, if you can help somebody, help them, offer to help. It's like, Jocko's super intimidating, but I was like, hey, can we help? What can we do? Do you need anything? I was going to go in there and be like, hey man, I'll teach. I was just like, hey, what can I do? How can I help? And he's like, cool. You want to go over there and help those guys? I'm like, great, got it. Yeah. And so I think he appreciated that. And then when they were in town, they were like, hey, we need a place to train. And JP's like, hey, come over to Paul's gym. And so he came over, and then 2 years later, same thing happened again. They were doing an event, and he just hopped in, and awesome. Something I've never seen a leader like that though. That guy, he controlled. I mean, because it's funny, because you think of like SEALs, are like, I'm afraid of a bunch of Navy SEAls and a bunch of military people, but like the commander of the SEAls is like, he runs a room a different way. Like even the jiu-jitsu class, like he was super respectful. I'm like, he came in, I'm like, I can't teach. He's here. He's been doing jiu-jitsu longer than me. He's a, Navy SEAl commander and everything. And he was like, nope, your gym, you take it. And I'm like, okay. And then slowly he kind of would come in and take a little bit. And by the end of the class, it was like his gym. He was running, everybody's loving it. But it was like, it was cool to watch, because some guys were like, well, I'm the alpha, so I'm taking over. And he was just like, no, man, go. And I'm like, oh, great.
Right. That's a cool experience.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Very cool. Yeah, absolutely. You still golf?
Man, it was funny. We actually, when everything shut down, my gym was shut down, everything. My wife and I are like, let's go play golf. We were trying to find something to do. And it was like, let's go play golf. So we joined a country club out here. We started playing. We were having a blast. It was like, this is the best. Everything's great. I started playing again. I was starting to get good again. Not like I was in college, but I started to play good. And we were going almost every day, because it was like the kids weren't in school. We had nothing to do. And it was like, so we'd go play, and I do like consulting stuff, on my phone, because it was like everybody was freaked out. So I was just replying to a bunch of messages, and we started playing. And then when the kids went back to school, it was like, no more time to play. Cause that's the thing about golf. It just takes so much time. Right? Yeah. It's like, and your kids, but between dropping the kids off and picking up from school, you got this big a window, and it's like, so we did it for a little bit. And since I haven't played in probably a year now, which sucks. I want to start playing again eventually, because it's fun. It's something my wife and I can do. Yeah. But you either got to have a lot of time, or just get used to playing 9 holes. Cause man, it's time consuming.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, the same way. I was like, man, I used to play a lot of golf, and then you just realize you got kids, business, responsibilities, get a little older. Some people still choose to just spend all their time on the course, but I think our priorities are probably a little bit different than that. And
that's the toughest part, because I want to be good at when I do it. So it's like, I don't want to half-ass it.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, golf is way better when you're good at it. So
it's fun. When you're not playing good, it's frustrating.
It's frustrating. So I'm sure, when we get older and got more time again on our hands, then it'll be something I get back into.
Yeah, especially and it's a hard thing for me to break, I guess, is breaking that 18 hole mentality. It's like, you can go play 9 holes, but in my head, it's like, doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Like,
I've because my wife does enjoy to play, and she'll go like, yeah, she'll just go for 9, and I love, like you said, yeah, just hitting for 9. You can get done in an hour and a half and be it's plenty.
no,
Be
it's
outside
plenty.
and hit some balls, have some fun, and because there's something about being on a course too, right? It's just
Yeah. That fresh air and that smell of the
it's just
grass.
peaceful, and I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah, it's fun.
it's a good deal. So, well, that's definitely off track, but anyway, uh, your college days brought me back to that. I was like, man, I know he's busy. He ain't got no time for golf.
Oh, there's no time. That was the one pandemic thing I had was like, I got a lot of free time all of a sudden.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, let's talk. What is like a critical moment for you where, obviously, things played out the way they did, which has you where you are here today, but had you chosen differently in that moment, you could be somewhere very different in life, because
Be way
I think,
different.
like you say, with the pandemic, and even still today, there's a lot of people in those moments right now, kind of the crossroads, and they're trying to figure out which way to go, but they just, you always want to know how it's going to play out before you choose, right? But that's that's the beauty of it. You don't get to know that. You just got to choose and have some faith and go for it, right? So,
Oh yeah.
is there a moment or two that kind of sticks out for you?
Yeah, and it actually goes back to a book, and I'm sure you probably read it, but The Alchemist. I read that during COVID because I'm guilty of this. Like, and my wife would always tell me that too, because I'm like, I always want more. I'm like, no matter what it is, I want, like, I start getting good at lifting, I want to do more. If I want to get good at jiu-jitsu, I want to do more. If I travel, I want to do more. She's like, you just got to enjoy it a little bit. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. It's like, I got to the next thing. And then you read The Alchemist, and he's talking about how, like, that's like the worst mentality, because you're never going to be happy. It's like, you get it. So for me, it was learning. I took a step away during the pandemic, and I was like, man, I really should have enjoyed some of these moments a little bit more. It's like, I got to do some crazy cool stuff with the UFC, traveling and other shows and competing. And it's like, you would get there and all you were thinking about was getting out of there and getting to the next thing. And I'm like, I had all these really cool, I mean, they were great. Don't take them wrong. They were great experiences, but I was like, they could have been 10 times what they were if I just would have enjoyed it. So for me, when I took a quote, it's actually had the screensaver on my phone, is like, it talks about where the man who is content, who's enjoying where he's at, like right now, is the guy that's winning. Cause it's like, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. It's like, like this whole Russia thing, that wasn't even a thing a month ago. Now I'm like, oh, cool. I'm like, COVID's over. Cool. Here comes Putin. I'm like, God, it's like, it's stressful. And it's like, if you dwell on that stuff. So it's like, and for me, it's like never being happy. It's, cause you always want that next thing. So I'm like, now I'm like trying to teach myself to be content, like really just kind of like taking the moment and be like, man, this is cool. This is fun. Because tomorrow's not promised. It's like we've seen, especially through like the pandemic and all this stuff. It's like, so that was a big thing for me, was like learning, like, I never want to be the guy that's not trying to get better, but as I'm trying to get better, I want to be better at enjoying where I'm at, what I'm doing, the people I'm with. As I'm learning, as you get older, like your network and your relationships is huge. It's like, like when we were at the last ULW, it's like, the events are always fun and like that, but it's like, before we started recording, you and I were talking about a little bit, is like hanging out with people and just talking to people. That's like the best part. Cause like that was one thing I was guilty of. I used to go to events in the past, and I was the guy, like, I go to like traffic and conversion, and I'd be like, get all this information. I go back to my hotel room, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to build this blog and this widget, and I'm going to do this. And I never never met people, never had a good network. In the last couple of years, I've really focused on my network, and I'm like, this is way better. It's like, because that's where it's really
it's almost way better than whatever's going on at the conference, right?
Yeah, because the stuff you're going to build, especially if you're into marketing and stuff like that, the stuff you build is going to be outdated in 2 years. It's like, anybody that's had infusion knows that.
Absolutely.
So it's wild, but the relationships last for a long time. It's like Mike Young. It's like him and I met, had to be like 5 years ago in Thailand. Then we go to the ULWs together. But it's like, you just meet people and it sticks. And it's so it's like building a strong network is fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Well, speaking of which, so what is kind of your vision moving forward? I know you said there's a few changes going on inside of the consultant business. But yeah, what's the vision for you? Even kind of short term, 5 years from now. It's like 5 years flies by way faster than it used to.
Especially when you get to be my age, 5 years flies by too fast. I'm
Yeah.
like, I'll be in my 50s. It's like,
Yeah, I
God,
know, dude. Seriously.
that to me, if to me, like when I was a kid, 50 was like, oh my God, they're about to die,
Right? Yeah, exactly.
and now I'm
Yeah.
like, man, I got 50 more.
You got so
So,
many more years. Yeah, I got so much to do yet. So,
man, for me, it's
um,
like really embracing my health and like relationships and stuff like that. Cause the way technology is going now, every year you get healthier and you can stay alive. The quality of your life goes up, your longevity goes up. I forget who it was. Somebody said like, there's someone born now that will live to be 150, like with the technology changes.
crazy, dude.
Yeah, it's crazy. So
Yeah.
it's thinking of like, but people are like, well, I don't want to live to be 150 because my life would suck. What's the quality of your life? I'm like, well, the quality of your life is what you do. It's like, I know people in their 70s that are like almost in nursing homes. And my mother-in-law, she gets up every morning and walks 5 miles. She's more active than most of my friends. And she's
Yeah.
75 years old. I'm like, this woman just constantly goes.
That's
And so
awesome.
she's motivating to me. I'm like, damn, I got to put some miles in. My
Yeah,
mother-in-law's
right.
doing it. So for me, it's like thinking about, how do I take care of myself, making sure I do my workouts, eat good, of course, but I have fun, you go and have dinner with the wife, do stuff like that. But really focusing on my health and fitness. And then, I'm really, really enjoying more and more talking about finance and helping people.
Yeah.
It's like, helping them understand money, doing things like that. And then for me, it's investing in other businesses that give me the flexibility to be able to do more things that I want to do and have fun. And eventually when the world gets semi-normal again, travel again, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But just really building all those things out and just taking care of, health and being a better leader, being a better person.
Yeah. You're a big travel guy. Where'd that come from?
And it came from traveling nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Growing up.
So I tell people, I was like, I grew up going nowhere. And then we got to Texas after I graduated. My buddy Travis was going to Brazil to compete at the world championships. I was like, I want to go. And then I looked up how much a ticket was and I was like, yeah, I'm not going to go. It's like, can't afford that. I was
Yeah.
a broke ass right out of college. And it was just one of those things, being in the right place with the right people. And one of the guys heard me say that. And he's like, oh, you really want to go? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, well, my wife's a flight attendant. I can get you a ticket. You just got to pay the taxes. I'm like, what's that? And he's like, $60. And I'm like, oh my God, yes. What do I got to do?
Oh, wow, yeah.
So I went to Brazil. I was 22 years old. Yeah, I would have been 23. I was 23. And man, it was just so crazy landing in Brazil and going through that whole experience. It just changed me as a person. I was like, this is insane. Cause it's like, I grew up in South Dakota and we would just go all around the Midwest. We go back and forth to Michigan and stuff like that. But it was like getting out of the country and like running into people. And it was like, seeing kids, like you see a movie, but then when you see kids playing soccer with a ball made out of freaking tape on a dirt field, and you're like, because people always complain about America and like, oh, America needs to change. It's like, man, go to another country. It's like, dude, it's like you're literally going in a cab almost crying because you're like, you see these kids and they're so happy kicking a tape ball. And then we got people here that are like, oh, we need to, redo everything. And I'm like, bro, leave the country. It's like, go see real poor people. And yes, I know there's poor people in America and we need to do a better job of that. But man, opening your eyes. So it's like going to Brazil and then Thailand it changed, Thailand changes you. It's like just seeing people and the cultures. So I literally got addicted to it, man. Like pre-COVID, it was funny. People were asking me like, are you going to like close your gym? Cause you're never here. And it was kind of bad looking back at it. Cause I was so addicted to traveling.
Yeah.
I was going with Mitch and those guys, we'd go to 4 events. And of course, Mitch's events were all over the world. We had one in New Orleans. We had one in Bali, one in Taipei, so it was like, I was traveling and I literally just got hooked on it. Colombia. It's like, I got hooked on seeing all these, experiences and everything. So now I'm trying to find a better balance of it. It's fun when you start, because it's the people, man. It's like interacting with locals. It's just something really cool.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the reason you have a business too, right? So you can get to that point where you can travel and do all those things and have somebody else, run the show for you.
Yeah. You got to create a real business, because a lot of guys in my industry, they create a job.
They're never in that position, right?
Yeah. They're never.
Like, they're not there.
Yeah. So, and I've learned the hard way. You got to find that middle ground of like, if it's a personality led business, I do need to be there more.
Yeah.
Right. But I have a good staff. Like, like for example, like this weekend we're going, it's my wife's birthday, and I'm like, okay, cool. I'm going to go for 4 days. We're going to fly down to Tempe and see my son at college. So my wife can have dinner with him. It's her birthday thing, and taking my daughter who loves to travel, but I don't have to worry about it. It's like, I got all the systems in place. I got the people. So it's like, I just got to make sure this week everybody sees me a bunch. But as far as the business runs, it could run without me, but it gets hurt if I'm not there enough. But that's one of the things I'm real passionate about, teaching people like how to create a real business. Like when I go to your events, stuff like that, it's like, a lot of times yours are like Monday through like Thursday, which is like the heart of the week. And a lot of times I'm just like, all right, guys, I'll be back. See you Thursday.
Yeah, absolutely. That's cool, man. So, well, let's start to wrap this up. If there's one or two things that if you were to give to the listeners today, and maybe it's financial, right? Could be whatever you want, but one or two things that if they were to implement today would help move their life forward today, what would that be?
Man, the biggest thing, because like I have family that struggles with it and friends that struggle with it. And we all struggle with like anxiety and stuff like that a little bit.
Yeah.
Anxiety about life, anxiety about, we all worry about the stuff that is, it's like that old saying, like 99% of the stuff you're worrying about is never going to happen. Yes, 1% is, it's like,
Right.
but 99% of the stuff is made up in our head. Like we're like, oh my God, this is so bad, blah, blah, blah. And then the person you talk to, they're like, huh, what? No, I don't remember that. You're like, oh my God, I'm an idiot. We've all been there.
Yeah.
So my big thing is like, and it's helped me a lot, is like, man, just take action every day. Like, look at what yourself. It's like, if it's your health and you're trying to get in shape, go walk, take action, go for a walk every day. Don't have to go to the gym and do CrossFit 7 days a week. If it's your finances, don't go in and do a complete financial overhaul if you don't have the basics, but like take action. Like, okay, what do I need to do? Okay, I need to open up a savings account. Okay, then what do I do? Okay, I need to put money from my checking to my savings account automatically. And it's like, because people, when I teach that at the events, they're kind of like, oh, that's not that big of a deal. And then when they do it, they're like, I come back like 6 months later, they're like, holy shit, there's money in my account.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's like, if you start taking action on your goals, that's the biggest thing, because you can write down goals, you can dream goals. That's awesome. But you got to take, action towards those goals. Now that'd be big steps. And that's the biggest thing I see, like at my gym, like people come in all the time and they're like, oh man, I can't wait to do jiu-jitsu. I'm coming every day. And I'm like, no, you're not. Stop.
Yeah.
They're like, what do you mean? I want this, I'm like, are you married? Yes. Do you have kids? Yes. Okay. Your wife's going to make you quit in 3 weeks.
Yeah. Right.
I go, you're done, or you're going to get hurt. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, you're 40 pounds overweight. I love your commitment.
Yeah.
Like, okay. So I tell them, like, my plan at my gym, when you come in, I tell people you can only train twice the first week. That's it. Because what it's like, guys, you've seen at the ULW, some of the guys that, the guys that did the work and the guys that didn't do the work.
Yep.
And most of them don't do the work. And then they're like, oh, this was too hard. It's like, well, no, you didn't do the work. So I tell the guys, like, hey, you want to get in these classes, you want to roll, you want to do stuff that's cool, like in the UFC, that's cool. But can you stand up 10 times? And then they're like, oh yeah, I can. And most of them can't. You're like, bro, we're going to work on standing up and then falling down and getting moving around. And then, you do that for 2 weeks, then you can go 3 times. And then the guys that actually listen to me, they stick around and get better. Then I always get the guys, they sneak in for extra classes or doing stuff. And they either get hurt or their wife gets mad, because you can't disrupt your life that much. Be like, hey honey, I got this new hobby where I'm gone 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, because then she's going to feel neglected. She's going to be, and I'm like, so I always tell them, I say, hey, you just got to do it this way. Cause if you can keep your wife happy and you add this new thing, she'll be happy, but don't go disrupt her entire life because you want to do this thing. I said, just, balance it out.
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. Just keep it simple. Right. I think I get it. People get motivated and excited and they want to jump all in. Right. Well, if twice a week's great, then why don't I just go 6 days a week and I'll be amazing. But yeah, like you say, no one can ever keep that up. So
yeah, it'd be like me when you say, hey, I'm doing the 100-mile race. I'm like, oh, cool. I want to try that. It's like, there's no way. It's like, you have to like, okay, cool. Run a mile. It's like, what? Yep. Yeah. Then run 2.
Yeah, absolutely. Same thing for sure. So, well, I appreciate you coming on, man. How, I know you're on social media and if we get any gym owners out there that want to,
the best place right now is to go to Instagram. Facebook is just sometimes a cesspool of life where it's like, it's a necessary evil in our world, but I really enjoy Instagram because, you don't get as crazy a posts, and then like, I love people's stories. Cause it's more, I feel like you connect more on people's stories. Like, oh, hey, they're doing that. Oh, I like that. So like for my Instagram, I'm putting on a lot of good content on there. It's all free stuff, teaching a lot of good stuff on there. So you just go to Instagram, /PAUL.HALME, easy to find, or you can go to my website, paulhalme.com. But yeah, Instagram, I really enjoy that because, I still am on Facebook, but man, Instagram is just a little more peaceful, enjoyable.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely agree there. So yeah, we'll get that all hooked up. You got a book also? What's the name of your book in case people want to check?
Yeah, I've got 2 books. 2 books on Amazon. One's for gym owners, how to make money with your martial arts school, and the other one is The Money Fight, which is a really good book. The Money Fight. And then you gave it to a bunch of people at the last ULW or one before, where it goes through like my whole system. Like I really simplified it down because it can get real complex. There's a lot of really complex, good books out there, but I was like, man, I want to make something simpler that helps people out. So yeah, if you check that out, that'll help you get a lot of the basic foundation, which will get you ahead of 98% of the people,
Absolutely. Yeah. So check that out, pick up a copy there, and we'll see you in just over a month. So
yeah, I'm excited. I can't wait for April. It's going to be a blast.